My first interaction with you, or just like seeing you on the internet, was your work with JSX UI. It
Oh,
seems
cool.
like a really interesting project and it's been going for a very long time at this point. So, can you tell us what JSX UI is?
Yeah, absolutely. So JSX UI is a play on SwiftUI, really. When SwiftUI came out, I was really fascinated with that, and that's something I would say everybody should do is look at other tools in the ecosystem to see how other folks are innovating. And yeah, I just wanted that for JSX. I love the web, and I don't want to leave the web, and so I wanted to bring that kind of to the JSX uh, more React ecosystem, but also JSX in general, because I'm looking like decades out. I don't know how long React will last. I think it'll be around, but I feel like JSX is a really great primitive and maps really well to design tools, honestly. Like that, like coming from a design background and working in design tools, the declarative nature of React. Um, yeah. So, yeah, going to getting to JSX UI, um, it was kind of like a not a pet project at first, and wanted to be like an idealization of a design system I had created like for 6 years. Just poured blood, sweat, and tears over it, and I let that go because I moved on from that company, and I realized like, oh, I would do all these things different, and so I wanted to, yeah, have something that was performant, easy to use, just kind of fix all the problems that we see in front end development of it just being hard to put components together, compose them together, and yeah, stay with performance and things like that.
This is a fun like thread that we all share is that we've all done a lot of design systems work and are interested in that. My time at Artsy, we used Brent Jackson's styled systems, which itself used styled components, and the API for that was nice because it was like very declarative, and we could come up with sort of our own primitives like spacing, and use that like just by props, and we even had like types and everything for it. But performance was the big thing that suffered. It was like that we got this like really nice design API and even had it like synchronized with our actual designs in Sketch and then Figma, but the performance really wasn't there. So how did you tackle this performance problem with JSX UI, and maybe kind of for the people who haven't worked in this space a little bit, could you kind of explain like tactically what you were trying to tackle with the library? Like how are you trying to approach this problem?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say the biggest problem I'm trying to tackle really is performance, and not even just performance, but also making it feel first class. Like it doesn't. I feel like the tools we use often don't feel first class or a more holistic experience. Like everything is working in unison, which I think leads to bad performance because we're tacking all these different libraries together. And going back a little bit, talking about that library I had made, I used Glamour out of the gate, which was great. Shout out to Sunil. Love that library. The CSS and JS movement was fascinating to me that we could capture dynamicism um, with CSS and also just provide a better API. And getting to JSX UI, I wanted to figure out how can I, mainly for layouts. I think layouts is a big one. So when you try to calculate any sort of custom layout, which comes up fairly often if you think about just really drag and drop, you have little like split windows or something like window management, responsiveness, opening a menu and needing to move items over. All these things like cause performance issues. And so layout is probably like the biggest thing I'd say I focused on with JSX UI and helped form the API. And through that, I came up with a few different um, paradigms that are similar to things that are out in the industry. And it's funny to see how some of these things have evolved over time. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm like working on something similar to that. So, like variants, for example, which in style system, right, they have this like variance system. And a lot of people have kind of like evolved. And then you have Tailwind that's got like this version of variance and all this, but those don't capture the entire story, which is kind of unfortunate. So I think I don't want to. We can get into that as far as like I love Tailwind. I think the idea is great, but it doesn't capture everything, and that's kind of the hard part here. Is like sometimes you need to capture a value or measure values, and that's right when you run into a performance issue. Is oh, I need to measure this thing. Maybe I'm doing layout thrashing, and it's just really chuggy. Um, yeah, so that's kind of like the biggest thing. That's a little. little tangent.
So like what layout primitives did you add? Because like I think from your stuff, I like from your tweets, I saw like HStack and VStack like years and years ago, and I've added those into like all the things that I do. But what did you add here for JSX UI?
Perfect. Yeah, totally. It's been a while since I've like worked on some of those things, so yeah, appreciate the reminder. So HStack and VStack, for folks that don't know, comes from SwiftUI. So that's probably a direct comparison. They also have ZStack, and those were, I'm very like idealistic, and so I was like, that's a little weird. Like, why call it HStack or ZStack? And I'll spend way too long and philosophical on what do you call this API? Like, how could someone use it to their full potential? And I landed on column and row because it felt like that was the primitive that most people I think know. And we have grid layout that's come out, and I wanted something that was just a uniform way to build user interfaces truly. And so I landed on three components for, I think, four components for layout, and just kept it to that to keep it very simple. And so there's a grid primitive, a column primitive, and a row primitive. And that allows you to compose pretty much any UI you can think of. And I was trying to bring some of my design roots into this while I was making it, of like, let's throw everything away, go back to first principles. If I could just start right now and create the best UI framework for someone to create a user interface that's performant, how would I do that? And so that's kind of where all these ideas have come from, and why the project's taken a really long time. I kind of put it on pause in a sense, and made the repo private because it wasn't to like where I want it to be. And so you can't really see anything about it right now publicly. I'm hoping within like the next year I can release that, and we can get into the evolution of like why that's not out yet. Uh, but yeah, just trying to really just solve layout. I think that's the biggest issue you can see across multiple industries, truly. So just to I know this is a front end focused podcast. If you look at other industries, well, yeah, I mean, I guess dev tools too, just in general. Um, if you look at across the industry, like in SwiftUI, they've run into, it's a brand new framework, and they've run into layout issues. It's a really hard problem. So just, yeah, I've been just very curious on how to solve it, I guess, is this JSX UI project. And yeah, I don't know, I can dig in a little bit into why you need to understand all the like layout primitives to make that work.
Yeah, I think this is just like a common vein, and it goes back to like just layouts are hard, and it's not just like, I think it would be simple if you just had to build one static layout, like in the days of print media where you know exactly where it's going to go and you need to design one layout, and it's like that's an easy enough thing to do. But we were talking before we started recording, and it's like one of the hard things to do these days is like you have, you know, dynamic resizing. So we've been talking about responsive design for many years now, but that still is really hard. And in the React world, it's like it's really easy to fall into, oh, I'm just going to do things logically on client side, which completely breaks down when you start doing server side rendering. And you know, there's all these like challenges that come into play, and you know, not to mention how you do layouts can affect performance quite a bit. So, ton of challenges in this space.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's easy to take it for granted that it's not that how hard it is until you get into like this death by a thousand cuts situation, truly. And I found, yeah, so the hard, to get into like why it's such a hard problem, I think, is because you need to know every single piece of state that's going on. And so going back to the variance API, I've experimented with a few APIs, and again went on this philosophical journey of like, what's a modifier, what is a variant, how do they coexist, are they the same thing? And in JSX UI there is a system, a modifier system, and a variant system. And the way I've described these is that a variant is a representation of props. So you have essentially different states. You could think of like a state chart, that's your variant. And modifiers will modify the actual output of it. Which is, they are very similar, but in the sense that modifiers come from SwiftUI, again, gleaning a lot from SwiftUI. Also not SwiftUI though, as well. There's Jetpack Compose. I don't know if folks have heard of that. It's like the equivalent to SwiftUI on Android. And so just trying to pull a lot of learnings from those. And with these systems, you can pretty much like if you're strict about it, you have a strict system, you can infer the full tree of what's going to happen. I can look at every single state. So it's almost like embedding a state chart into JSX is kind of how I think about it. So folks like David Khorshid promote state charts and love it. And I love the benefits of state charts. I think the reason that adoption maybe is not as high, like you know the value of what a state chart does and what the benefit it brings, but it feels like not enough people are using it. And so JSX UI for me is trying to meet people where they're at. And you don't even know it's like a state chart behind the scenes that's kind of running everything. And there's a strict mode, and I think I won't have a strict mode possibly. So, but yeah. We'll see.
I've actually been like solving this exact problem in my side project right now. So, like, are you saying that JSX UI kind of like through that JSX pragma is creating a state chart behind the scenes that like knows all about the layout and can like do it performantly because of that?
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
the current writings and what I put out on JSX UI is pretty dated. It's kind of, there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that I've
Mhm.
worked on that I'm eager to get released out. But that I kind of, that led me into this compiler concept of compiling away design and kind of just trying to find the right level of what JSX even is. Because once you have that representation, it's almost like a design tool. You think of like a design tool I'm moving through, they have probably a JSON representation, something like Figma, and they spit out all this garbage, and or it's not garbage, but it's their API. It's how they are able to interact and understand like what someone's intent was. And I think that's the biggest thing I'm trying to capture is that all of this is intent really. As a designer, I'm trying to mock up this thing and show you how it should work. That should be expressed through our code. And I think JSX is just a really good vehicle to be able to do that.